Peace, family. Welcome in. This is my pop up live. This is not Metaphysical Monday. I want to thank the people that did tap into Metaphysical Monday, those that asked questions, those who made comments and just engaged with the bill. Um, the viewers who came in after the live, I appreciate that. It's more to come. Tonight, this is a heavy live. Uh-oh. I'm setting up my candles for my ancestors, for peace, for good energy flowing. Of course, my water vessel is sitting here with me too. I'm working with my obsidian. This was a gift I recently got. Ashe. I give thanks for this tower. This is really nice. Um, for my energy work. We're gonna be talking a lot about energy and the energy that's external and internal, things that we create. So tonight's build is called Are You Breaking a Spell or Reinforcing It? Okay, so I just want to take some time to get the space together here. I'm burning a let me see what the other mix is on here. Give me one moment. I'm using a ginger and blood orange incense. It smells really good. I like that spicy ginger energy. Welcome in to everyone that's tapped in and will be tapped in. Tonight we're gonna go into again, are you breaking a spell or reinforcing it? I was just actually moved to do this about a week ago and I never got a chance to get on, but I'm here tonight. So again, I'm High Priestess Sis'Star Kola Soljet. You can just call me Sister Soljet or Kola, whatever you know. It's all good. Anyway, welcome in. So what is this about? Are you breaking a spell or reinforcing it? So brothers and sisters in my new Soljet family, we're gonna talk about the spell energy tonight. You know, you hear a lot of talk about spells and the spiritual world, and whether people are practicing traditional religion or they're involved in alternative spirituality or the occult or dealing with just things that they may have heard in their family. You know, eventually you hear somebody talk about spells. You know, I grew up as a Baptist and a Catholic. That's just how it was. I come from a Creole family. And I used to just hear a lot of, talk in the background as a kid. So, it's common in some families where they're just talking about, I've never seen them, practice spells or do anything like that, but I would hear people talk, about this happening to this person and this, oh yeah, this, did you hear about this or did you hear about that? So the existence of it was always there, as far as being from the South where I'm at, and in many families, family friend circles. But the point is, there are some people that's obsessed with that kind of talk and that kind of energy and producing this type of fear. Um, is getting more popular now where you'll see it, oh, this person is doing this, or you'll see it in digital spaces, like with certain tarot readers or spiritualists, and they may be suggesting like somebody is working against you. You'll see these titles like, is your mother working spells on you? Somebody's paying, to take you out, just different things that's creating this energy of fear in people who may be affected by that message or may not have a lot of knowledge um on energy and energy work, or just people looking for something to latch on to, because it's almost like spreading gossip. Sometimes hearing about spell work and, oh, somebody's doing this to you and all of that, it I don't know, it's like people latch on to it sometimes like gossip, like they want to hear about it, they're interested in it, they're interested in the unknown, and and they'll try to make it match their life in some kind of way, right? Some people will be like, oh, a dark magician or practitioner is targeting you, or somebody close have done some things to you. And they people have many reasons for moving like this, because I'm not saying that these things don't exist, but some people do this, like I said, to create a fear. They create hysteria, and the fear is used for control. Sometimes this is to influence people to spend their money, making them feel like, oh, yeah, you got something on you. Let me take it off for you, and really feeding into the fear of the person, especially if they come to you already with these fears and, you know, the understanding that they may have, especially in certain even religions, where people are taught, that this is good and this is evil, and just different things like that. You got people walking around scamming, not being real with people. And sometimes, like I said, people genuinely operate, even practitioners, and some, and I've noticed that in some cultures, even some ministers and pastors in the church, they talk a lot about spell work. That's like it just almost like a part of the script. It just continue, where it becomes like an obsession. And they have people that really think that they're, believe that this is happening, or that they're under some type of spiritual attack. I used to have clients that literally come to me, and they're so entrenched in this spell stuff that even when I'm clearly looking at them and can see other things that's happening in the reading or whatever, they're hell bent on saying, no, it's a spell. No, my sister's working on me. No, this person's trying to kill me. Whatever it is. Um, and that's a lie, because that, and I've had to get those same clients out of bad situations. Is one client in particular, because she had paid, thousands of dollars to so-called have a spell removed on a person that didn't show up, and that's a whole nother story. Okay, like I have like certain connections with people in certain circles in this community, people that have a lot of authority and power, and not necessarily, see, when you do the work, it's just like working in a certain field. You're going to know certain people, old school people, godmothers, and just different people that we respect in this field. So I definitely, when the woman came to me broken because she had got her whole account wiped out, she came to me crying, and you know she wanted to unalive herself, but we got to the bottom of that, and I got the right people on the line to make him honor what he's supposed to do as a practitioner. Because yes, he was a real practitioner, but he was very greedy. He probably still out there scamming people, and he was taking advantage of this woman, and she was an older woman. So I had a problem with that. But whatever the case, moving on. So I'm not saying that like spells don't exist, or I mean, I myself, I'm a spiritualist. I know it exists, and I'm not going to tell you that people don't perform like just bad spiritual work or intentionally direct bad energy towards people. But everything isn't a spell. This is how people get caught up in what I was just speaking to about my client. You know, you got to also, when I say, are you breaking the spell or reinforcing it? We have to also look at what we're doing to add to these energies, how our mindset is. So this is what this build is about tonight. Okay, sometimes our own fear, again, in lack of knowledge and lack of spiritual connectivity and application. I'm big on application, because you don't know what works, what's good, what's bad, really, until you apply it. Like really, um not just hearing about it, not spreading it like it's gossip, not just saying it because you heard somebody in the family say it, or this is some belief that um you choose to hold for whatever reason. But a lot of times, you begin to ruminate, and you can actually cause, people, your own paranoia can cause you to reinforce an idea that somebody is planted in your mind. Okay. Sometimes we overestimate our significance in somebody else's agenda. We inflate our own importance as a target. Like, for instance, I used to read in like this healing book that I used to we studied out of years ago. It talked about like dark magicians and people that operate on a high level of energy work, and it doesn't matter if they're practicing dark or light. What I'm speaking to is people who operate at a high level, meaning like they're not even thinking about people that's not on their energy grid. So sometimes we getting so caught up, and we hear and we see these tarot messages, or whatever kind of message that deals with, oh, a dark witch. Even some Christians are on this now. They have their own channels, and they're out here giving a message or some type of a prophecy or whatever you want to call it. But it's like it's still implanting that seed of fear into people, and they buy into it. A lot of people buy into that. But what you got to remember is what would make you that important. That because you have to really understand what goes on when a person is working in this energy. And I'm gonna talk a little bit about that too, and how much energy it takes out of a person, right? Like, why would you be this person's target? Like, why, again, what is the connection? What would be their motive? What makes you think you're worth that person's energetic investment? I remember when one of my friends, he's a really good friend of mine, like family, and he's Latina, and, he is really, he understands the spiritual world, and we would have these deep conversations and stuff like that. But I remember we were talking about, I went into a botanica, and I was saying, why don't you go to a botanica to get what you need? And he said, no, 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 I'm not going in there. You don't know. They may have some mojo. He made some kind of word that they may have on the items. Like, you really think a energetic practitioner or a storekeeper even is in there like, oh, I'm going to cast a spell on this and I'm going to cast a spell on that. It gets a little crazy sometimes. Like, that's not what people are doing, But if you don't have an understanding of what's going on, and I'm gonna move on from this. If you don't have an understanding of what's going on, you can buy into what has been implanted in your mind. So at some time, like I said, I want to say this again. We overestimate our significance in somebody else's agenda. We inflate our own importance as a target. But underneath because underneath all rituals, prayers, thoughts, words, intentions, and beliefs, we're dealing with energy and frequency at the end of the day. And that's the another important part that we're talking about. Energy and frequency. The external energy and frequency that surrounds you, and the energy and internal energy and frequency that's within yourself. Okay? This conversation is not simply who put something on me, but what am I connected to? What am I feeding? What am I practicing? And am I breaking the spell or reinforcing it? So let's go into what is a spell. Because what if our understanding of spell is too limited? We commonly imagine a spell to be a deliberate ritual, somebody possibly sitting at an altar, burning candles, or words being spoken, and an intention being directed towards another person. And that definitely can be spell work. But intention, prayer, repeated words, thoughts, expectations, beliefs, and behaviors also carry influence. That's why even people that say stuff like, I'm going to pray for you, some people really do need the prayer. I get it. I don't use the word prayer, but I use it as a lack of a better word for understanding of those who may still use prayer. I say divine intentions, but there's people that want to pray for you and over you and all these different things. And sometimes it's a little disrespectful because you may have a certain belief system or a certain level you're vibrating at, and people are thinking that you're living wrong or you need this, prayer that they're going to do for you, right? As if their frequency is higher than yours. I understand giving people positive vibes during times where they may be having a hard time or being sick, but sometimes those prayers add to the negativity because we don't know what these people are praying. Maybe pray with you would be better. Let me speak some words of divine, a high vibration or a healing vibration or a healing frequency, or to help you with breaking these financial curses or whatever it is, these blocks. It pray with you is better than sometimes praying for or praying on another person, right? So because these things carry influence, something repeated long enough can begin shaping the way we think, respond, behave, and see ourselves. So before we can even talk about breaking a spell, we need to broaden the conversation of what we're actually calling a spell. What has been repeated? I want you to think what has been repeated in my life long enough that I've treated it as reality. What has been repeated in my life long enough that I have started to treat it as reality. So now we're going to go into the energetic grid, because this is where, you know, I'm not denying the fact of spells or just negative energy or people who do things consciously and subconsciously or unconsciously. So we're going to talk about the energetic grid. What happens when several people begin feeding the same intention, expectation, limitation, or opposition onto you in your life? So this is the part when we talk about the external forces, because it is real. Sometimes the grid is conscious, and sometimes it's a collective move. Um, especially in toxic families. Sometime in the workplace this happens. Sometime in friendship circles, people communicate, people take sides, people gossip, they reinforce another person's hostility. Like if there's some type of a leader or person that's like that makes the decisions or call shots within these family units or whatever group it is, and the other people just automatically they're picking up on the hostility of another person. Like they've just designated you as the target, or this is how it's always been, like in some childhoods, and a lot of this talk has been happening more and more in these spaces, especially since like 2020, when people are talking about understanding that they've been doormats or black sheeps for families, or um, people are not respecting them, or just whatever that is for you or for whomever. But people are starting to become aware because for so long, a lot of this stuff you think is just normal. This is what it is, like somebody just giving you an awful nickname, but it just sticks. Or you may not even like it, but people continue. You just think it's a normal thing. They're calling you this name, right? Until you set the boundary. But people also deliberately interfere. They may consciously direct spiritual work towards somebody, and that's what I was just talking about. Like, oh girl, let me pray for you. Oh, I'm praying for you, sister. And most of the time they don't. They'll be saying, oh yeah, even on like Facebook or something, oh, I'm praying for you. That's the prayer, right? But they have people that really they obsess over certain energies and certain light and certain frequencies, and people are obsess over what you're doing, whether you're doing well or doing bad. It's like they want to see, I want to control this certain, level that you're at, so they're almost getting excited over your downfall. And some people really think, like, oh, she just living bad, living for the devil. He's living for the devil. So I need to break this curse. Or, they're trying to become this curse breaker over your life, right? But sometimes they are also directing negative energy towards you, or something that's an opposition of what you're really wanting to achieve. And sometimes nobody is sitting at an altar. This don't have to do with altar work and things that people try to limit spirituality in, or limit the power of energy work. Like they have people who have parents, people in their life that they stay in their head. And the way sometimes their work works is the thoughts they're thinking towards you, the words that they're saying to themselves that you may not even know anything about. I did say parents. I'm not limiting it to parents, but I just know that sometimes they're invested in their children's life to the point where it may not be what you want, but it's the way they see it, or what they want, or what you want for your child may not be in alignment to what they want for themselves. And I'm speaking of adult children, or children as they're growing, even in the teenage years, that become a battle too. Or if a teenager or a young person is watching this video, sometimes you feel like you're misunderstood. And it's not always in the ways that are just these big, like I'm just so different. Sometimes it's in the simple. We just don't, we see things differently, and we have to, of course, to a degree, you have to learn how to navigate through that. Let me go ahead because I'm gonna touch back on that. But it's like someone can continually think negative about you, speak against you, resent your progress. They'll guilt trip you and pull you back into an assigned role, or consciously work against your glow up without even ever lighting a candle. That's what I'm saying. It's just the stuff that's in the head. And sometimes it is in families or friends, or, the associates. It's the crab in the barrel dynamic that we all know about, where people are comfortable with you as long as you remain the same as everybody. As long as you stay like the tribe or in the barrel or stay down, then you're good. You may not even realize what you're a part of, how deep this magic or how deep this curse or spell goes. And then you hear people talking about breaking generational curses. And yes, of course, a lot of times that's in the bloodline, but sometimes a generational curse could just be within your culture and community too, just the whole generation of people, the generations that we're dealing with, and things that people accept as normal behavior, right? So the crazy part about an energy grid, though, is sometimes people are operating on the same energy grid and don't even know each other. This is how this happens even online. It's almost like people feed off certain things where you could be getting mistreated, or you could be feeling the same attacks from different people that don't even know each other, but they're feeding off of the vibration, or they have the same frequency, so it's connected. You know, we on the same vibe, same wavelength. And they aren't necessarily can't even talk. See, they aren't coordinating. I don't know why I can't say that. Somebody messing with my energy, you know, but they aren't coordinating it. But somehow these different people keep reinforcing the same limitation, the same expectation, the same pressure, the same dynamic, or the same funny style energy, right? The grid, therefore, can be consciously orchestrated, socially or familiarly reinforced, or just reproduced from people who never even met. So, my closing question on this module is, who is feeding the grid and what keeps connecting me to it? For those who know they're in a grid. Um, this is interesting. Yeah, I kind of went off script a little bit, but going back to that, we're praying for you when help becomes a part of the grid. Is everything somebody calls prayer, concern, or love actually helping you? People can say, we've been praying for you. Okay, but why are all of you discussing me? You know, some people just come out of nowhere with stuff like that. Like, oh yeah, I've been praying about you lately, you know. And you may be doing perfectly okay. And I mean, like I said, for those that subscribe to that, that's good. But everybody that is praying for you is not praying with you, okay? Or sending divine intentions to you, right? So this is all of the energy grid stuff that, you know, people are afraid of. Like, oh, you know, they're casting spells or just whatever, or however manifestation this negative energy is being casted. Some people don't even know that they're the greatest spell workers. They're just negative people. And they cast negative spells by the energy that they put out into the world and sometimes cast upon our lives. And when somebody starts saying they're praying for you, especially if you haven't asked for that, or you're not in a place where you just like, you know, it's not a person that even, you know, necessarily champions you, but all of a sudden they're praying, you know, praying for you. You know, like, what exactly are you agreeing about before you pray? What have you collectively decided is wrong with me? You know, because I haven't told you anything is wrong, but you making an assumption that I need prayer, you know, or somebody else need prayer. Because see, prayer itself, it carries an intention. Like I said, it's not all about what people think it is and using certain tools and things of that nature. Um, is even speaking it. You know, of course, the words we put out, that's one of the most powerful prayers, spells, intentions that we can literally manifest, the breath, you know, thought and breath. So somebody calling an intention prayer doesn't automatically mean the recipient experiences that as intentional support. You may not want that. So the closing question becomes, are you praying for my well-being or praying for me to become the version of me that makes you comfortable? Because we're talking about breaking these spells, breaking these energetic patterns. And of course, we want to recognize them in the external way, or externally, we want to see what's around us, but we don't want to get locked into that. Because a lot of times we reinforce, hmm, we reinforce with another person. That's how spells work. You know, a lot of times when people say, you know, well, I'm a this or I'm a that, I'm religious, you know, I'm covered, you know, I nothing can work on me, you know, spells don't work against me. You know, people say stuff like that. And that's fine if it's indeed true, but many times people are just talking. You know, they're just saying something, and you can literally see the outcomes of certain things because they're already on that energy grid themselves. So they're reinforcing the spell, right? They're already operating on a very low vibration. So when a person attacks you, whether it's at an altar or just by spoken word or just speaking things to you and over your life that you begin to believe, or that, actually speaks to the frequency where you are. It does work. It does work. It works because you're not working. It works. It not the you as in whoever watching this, but the proverbial you. It works because we're not working, right? So let's go into this module, directing energy from the practitioner side. So this is what I was speaking to earlier. You know, what does deliberately directing energy toward another person feel like when you are conscious of your own energetic condition? So I can talk about me and the work that I've done, the energy work that I've done, the healing work that I've done, and protection work. Because I've never been into dealing with, you know, oh, let's, I don't even believe in a, like, oh, let's do spells or, but I do believe in protection, rites, and rituals. I definitely believe in that. I don't always feel like it's necessary because a lot of times, again, it's our own mindsets, it's our own frequency that will keep us in having certain outcomes, right? So whether the intention is protective, defensive, angry, whether you retaliating or whatever you're doing, even if you're putting out something in love is actually a high frequency. Blessing something or blessing somebody with a pure intention, that's a high frequency. But when you're dealing with heavy dark frequency, even if it's protection work or you're dealing with negative shit, you literally feel that negative shit coming from out of you. Even if it's something you feel justified in, like, oh, this happened, or this person stole from me, or this person destroyed my life, whatever it is, sometimes, if you're really sensitive and you vibrate high anyway, you're gonna think twice before just putting your energy out into things because it takes energy from you. It takes a lot of energy from you, especially people. And if they tell you anything different, they're not telling the truth. There's people out here all day long that are into the occultic world that sit there and just continue to spin spells. They sell spells. They do spell work for people. They do it for themselves. They're always thinking that people are putting something on them. Or that, they got practitioners that think like that too. And a lot of it is because of the shit they doing. Just like people that aren't practitioners that always think somebody got something on them. Like, what are you doing that you got this many damn enemies? And some people say, "Oh, it's what I'm doing right." What do you? If you're doing something right, then you should be sleeping right because your frequency should be vibrating at a level where even if there's people that's jealous, that's beneath you. That's ankle biter shit, right? And we have to get to a place where we vibrate higher than the hater. You got to literally vibrate higher than the hater because people gonna be people. But what do you have going on that somebody and they do have crazy people in the world, and that's I don't know what you call that because they got people physically. They allow the ego to go so mad, but you got to protect yourself from those energies where people will attack. We see it in friendships. We see it a lot on internet now where, people like Nolan Wells or Shanquella or, that lady, I don't know her name, but she went to the party with her friends and she was the only black woman and ended up dying or getting killed. Just things like that do happen and that is extreme, but you definitely got to vet people. We got to be tapped in because people tell on themselves long before your body can sense things long before your mind is ready to accept it in many situations. So anyway, let me go ahead because I'll get caught up and start going into something else. But anyway, that's what I wanted to speak to. um it takes so much out of a person and it's almost like, why do it? It would have to be something really worth it, especially for people who like a high vibration. Some people stay in this darker frequency. They have the potential to move up or down, but they choose to stay in a darker, heavier, angry, retaliating, paranoid type of frequency. But most highly developed practitioners are not doing that. Even if they operate on a darker side, they're not doing that. And that's one of the reasons highly developed practitioners aren't necessarily sitting around just throwing work, and even people that irritate them. It's almost like I'm not gonna go that dark because I really could. I don't want my example to go that dark, but it's like some people that know they can fight. Like if you take a fighter and there's some little guy or girl that's irritating them, right? But if they're a fighter of a high integrity and they know their own strength, they're not going to necessarily bite on every irritation. They're above that. They're not going to, they'll be like, oh, go ahead. Because they know what they can do, simply do to that person, or simply how they can affect that person and how detrimental that could be on different levels for their careers in some cases, for their freedom. But anyway, yeah, that's not always happening. So we have to start looking at ourselves too. And what are you doing when you feel like you're creating that much friction or that much anger or that much hate in other people? Or if you feel like you're doing something right, again, if you're literally doing something right or high vibrational, then those people shouldn't even be able to touch you. You know, it's only when we get stuck or we have our own insecurities still, or we haven't examined ourselves or what we may feel are our weaknesses that we feel, as if we gotta attack and defend everything. Nobody's bigger than that, but we just gotta keep it in check. Sometimes we do think like that and think crazy or think, in a way that because of things that's already happened, right? So anyway, but we again overestimate our significance in somebody else's agenda. And so the question then becomes, if you want to talk about protecting yourself, if you really feel like that's the threat, who or what deserves that much of my energy? You know, and that's what a practitioner is thinking, who or what deserves that much of my energy? And you got to think of that too when you set a boundary. So when the grid gets inside of you, let's talk about that. This is when we got to take our own power for ourselves. What happens when the people around you no longer have to tell you that you can't because you started believing it yourself? So this is what I was talking about when people are feeding the grid or feeding you, or it becomes what we think is the norm. One of the most powerful parts of the energetic grid, and I've talked about the energetic grid for anybody that's just tapping in. Welcome in to everybody. This is a pop-up live. Again, it's called Are You Breaking the Spell or Reinforcing It? And I definitely talked about the energy grid in the glitch, and I'm speaking about it again. It's a force field or an energy field where, everything is moving in frequency and energy within our universe, right? Within people, within the world around us, as above, so below, as within, so without. But when I talk about an energy grid, it's like matrix energy, right? But I'm not speaking to the full matrix, but like just the matrix inside of toxic families or relationships and things of that nature. And the grid is the thing that keeps everybody in check. It's like the boundary, you know. Sometimes it's also the frequency. It's not just the boundary, but the frequency that the people that run the grid or the gatekeepers stay on and expect you to operate in. Or they could also be operating at a level or of awareness that is higher than yours, not necessarily is more righteous, is higher than yours because they have an awareness of a game that they're playing and they keeping you in this force field. And we sometimes feed the force field. So again, one of the most powerful parts of this grid is when people convince us things like we can't live without them. It happens in family relationships, overbearing parents, narcissistic parents, and family circles. Sometimes in relationships, love relationships with people, whether it's a man or a woman, um, or whoever. I can't make it without this person. And they put that and feed that into you. Some people convince you that you can't survive without them. Somebody may feel like you need them to provide something for you. This is when all help isn't help. All money ain't good money. This is when we got to really measure because these are things that can really tether you to the grid. Sometimes our own lack of motion, we get used to just, some people call it lazy, but sometimes people call it comfortable. You just get too comfortable with, maybe the help, or maybe you don't have that enthusiasm or that spark. You may be a charismatic person. You may be a person that's more, they just have a natural ability to lead, to manipulate, or, for whatever their agenda is. Sometimes they don't think they're doing anything wrong, but it's about, at the end of the day, it's control underneath. You know, I need to give you somewhere to live. You need somewhere to live, or when are they telling everybody like, oh, she got to live with me or whatever it is. I need somebody, and the thing when I keep saying I need, not they, it's because it becomes a I need because they'll put into your mind that you need them to survive. So now it's, you get into a space where you become needy and you don't want to do the work. And that's why I say sometimes it becomes laziness. Sometimes it's just I don't know how else to survive. So we become like almost it becomes an entitled energy. That in itself is part of the spell that you can put on yourself. I need somebody to rescue me when I'm short. I need these particular people to save me in order to survive. And these beliefs can remain even after the circumstances begin changing. Now I want to go back because once the spell is filled, it becomes a role. Once these spells are filled, meaning when you begin to believe this in yourself, when you begin to take this as the ultimate truth, the person as the controller, it becomes a symbiotic relationship. It becomes something that becomes toxic. Something that a lot of people who are the recipients of this kind of endless help or support become very resentful of the person that's giving the help. And that resentment is the first key to waking up, to getting up out of the grid. It says, um, to a point like sometimes you can really believe that you're nothing without certain people or that you can never make it. Like I said, a lot of uh, kind of like controlling family members. It don't have to just be your parents, but just people that want to dominate and just be this architect of your life. They'll have you believing so bad. They may even be getting money from you while you out working and doing your thing. So they don't want that to change. So they begin telling, making you think and you begin to believe even when your circumstances began changing. You may not even realize. I'm gonna tell you about my situation real quick. I didn't even realize at a point that I was making as much money as I was making when I was in this situation with family, to a point that I really didn't think I could. I didn't think I could. I started looking at the money I'm making. I'm like, damn, I'm bringing in some, I could get out of this situation. But I was so convinced that I couldn't. But once I seen, I was like, okay, I'm out of here. But so, because see, if your mind begins to believe something, just like in slavery, you can leave physically, but the mind believes it's still locked down, or it's still limited, or still needs, certain energies to survive. So the closing question begins: what if the thing telling me that I can't leave is no longer the person, but the belief they helped me help me believe, or they instilled into me? So now we go into module 6, talking about poverty, necessity, and being unable to leave. What happens when you recognize the grid, but you're not genuinely in a position to leave yet, to leave the job, to leave the situation, to leave the relationship, to leave the family cycle, the friendship circle or organization? Sometimes people can't just leave. Like I said, if even if somebody watching this still live under the regime, they may be young, they can't leave their parents' house or whatever the reason is. You can't afford to live without the marriage, the roommate, whatever it is. You can't just say, some of these things are like, just cut everybody off, leave, gray rock them, go no contact. Sometimes you're not in a position to do that. You may not have the money. You may be dependent on someone else for housing, or whatever the situation may be. You may need the job. You may not have the transportation. Whatever the circumstances is that keeps you tethered into this energetic grid that is not for you, right? You may be under somebody else's authority, like even with a boss dynamic at work, and you're just not in a position or have the real to deal with those real material consequences if you make a sudden or impulsive change. But it doesn't mean that you can't begin breaking the spell before you physically leave the environment. Okay. Sometimes the first movement actually happens internally. It's recognizing that you are in this grid, or in this spell, or in this situation, in this limitation. You got to recognize the bullshit. You may already starting to recognize it. You're starting to see the glitches in people. We talked about that in the glitch, when they start changing. People you thought you knew, familiar faces and relationships, and you see the type of time everybody on. So you get to a place where you even stop arguing with them. You see them, and I don't know, they don't always know that you see them, but sometimes they do know. But that's when it get bad. But long before they even know you see them, and you choose not to call it out. You choose not to say nothing. Sometimes you got to just keep moving in that space, especially if you live with somebody that you're dependent on materially. For some people who are young people, or even adults that may have hit a bottom, you gotta keep some kind of form of money coming in. Period. You have to. And honestly, that keeps you and takes you out of that place. Whether it's working a job, working two jobs, working and doing a side hustle, working and even just being out of the space, getting out of that energy field as much as possible. For some people, I know they'll get connected to a spiritual or a church or their community while they're going through different things. They'll find certain hobbies or certain groups that are on the same frequency that kind of gives you inspiration. And sometimes you'll also find other solutions. It may be that's where you find people that may have a space, know of a space, know something reasonable, know of a new job, know of whatever it is that you need. You don't always have to stay connected to that grid, but you got to get out and you have to understand and see it and begin doing something. You can't just say, well, these are my circumstances, so I'm stuck. This is how people stay in spells and stay wrapped up in literal curses for so long. When people are sitting there looking at you weird because you 35 and never left home, are you even 28, whatever? They looking at you weird, like, what's wrong with this person? But they don't even realize the psychological warfare that you've been under and that you have been under unconsciously. It's like something isn't right, but you can't put your finger on it because it became the norm and something that your lack of action have reinforced, right? And again, I'm not talking about any of my supporters or viewers. I'm speaking to anybody, everybody, myself, the proverbial you and us and we. Okay, so now let's talk about a little bit more about how do you break out of an energetic grid. Okay, you have to begin working on yourself for sure. Um, and you don't even need everybody to admit that they're involved. You don't have to call it out yet. You begin preparing for this breakout of this grid, right? You got to get off the plantation. You got to get off the plantation. And slowly the dynamic will start changing while you're still in it, right? So it becomes, what can I begin breaking internally while I'm building the resources to leave physically? What can I begin breaking now? What can I begin changing now while I'm here in this space? Okay. I tell people the same thing with a plan for changing the structure of a diet, a lifestyle, or even, where you are now. You may not like how you look right now, but you got to accept the you right now in order to even change that, right? That's another subject, but still, it can go into keeping you on a grid because people can also play on that, play on your self esteem. And that's the reason you can't get out the grid or nobody will ever want you or, whatever it is. So, what does breaking the grid actually look like in real life? For some people, the answer is straightforward. Don't answer every call. Stop explaining yourself. Go gray rock, where you just kind of keeping everything boring or muted or one word or very, very curt, or just short, very short with the people. That's one way. Limit access. Stop explaining yourself. Change what information people receive about you, and that's part of the gray rock too. Stop participating in every argument. Just starting to check out or just not giving it energy. Don't feed the grid, right? Physically distance yourself when it is possible. We talked about those that have to stay in the grid maybe longer, or and you're not really staying in the grid, but you're still under that influence, but not under that influence. You may physically still be in a certain space, but you are already being shifted out of that space because you're not in that space anymore, right? You're beginning to really align yourself with a different thought. You got to change your thoughts because when the thoughts go, everything else becomes a creation. When your thoughts go, the body follows. Where your mind goes, we begin to actually change the shift, or we begin to change the frequency by shifting the way we think. What we're saying to ourselves, what we believe about ourselves, right? So anyway, move when you're able to move, right? When you are in a position to move, don't just stay. Some people are staying places because they cheap. You got the money to move, but you're like, nah, I think I'm gonna just stay here a few more years. I'm gonna stay a little longer, But you really keeping yourself in a pretty prison or a trap. But for somebody else, leaving may sometimes it take months, it take years. It take years of building resources or rebuilding an internal sense of independence. And some grids are thicker than others, depending on how old you are when you wake up, how long it took for you to see this. Sometimes this could be a shock. It can cause trauma to the system when you realize what you've really been under for so long, right? So, like patterns, for instance, like patterns that's reinforced themselves for decades may take more work to dismantle than something you entered just 6 months ago, especially like in a relationship. And the ones when we talk about decades, that's generally in family systems, sometimes friendships, and maybe for others, relationships, but generally, relationships ain't lasting decades like that no more. But sadly, but in family cycles, this stuff can go on for decades where you become like a very older person before you even realize, you could be like in your late 30s, your 40s, your 50s, your 60s before you even realize what you've been affected by, why you've never reached certain goals, or why you are getting certain outcomes, or you feel like you're going in loops, you're ruminating. But the longer the circuit has been running, the more places you may discover where it has attached itself to your thinking, behavior, and relationships and material circumstances. But recognizing the grid already changes your relationship to it. Exactly. What really did it for me, because I was in some shit. Man, still moving and navigating through it because it's not easy. When you're dealing with master manipulators, people that use psychological warfare as their superpower. And also use love bombing, and not just in relationships, because family members can love bomb you as well. But I used to always say that I remember in those days, and that made me happier as I went through this frequency that I couldn't get out of. I had to stay in this certain space for a long time. Well, 6 years total, but it took me about 3 years to really navigate what was really going on around me. Even my spiritual teacher was telling me you still don't get it. You still, I can't believe you still in this space. Because some relationships you feel like you've trusted people, especially when you're talking about parents or cousins or sisters or brothers or whatever, you don't even want to sometimes believe what it is, and you're looking for other excuses. So that's a part of why how it's being reinforced by you, because you're taking a certain level of abuse or certain levels of mistreatment, or believing certain things that these people are saying to you because they love you. Of course, they're not doing this to hurt you or destroy you. Or why would they want to, backstab me? Why would they want to stop and prevent me from doing something that's moving me forward? Why would they be unhappy that I'm achieving this goal or blowing up or saving money? You'll be surprised. You'll really be surprised. But the one thing that I remember, and not just people that I lived with, but just people around me, that's supposed to be my soul tribe, that awareness is everything. That awareness became my superpower, because once you become aware of something, the spell is already breaking. It's already broken. Well, it's already breaking. It's not broken till you take action. But once you're able to see, you automatically start, changing the frequency and changing the energy around you. And that's the reason why certain things they say, what I was speaking to earlier, it can't affect you anymore. The words don't affect you anymore. The put downs don't affect you anymore. You stop believing it because you see it from the perspective. You see it for what it is. You see the bullshit for what it is, and you have seen the faces as the mask of falling of what you're dealing with. Now, choosing to stay in it is part of reinforcing it. If you choose to see it and not do something to change it, then you basically you co-signing it, you agreeing to it. Okay. So once you get to a space where you can see it and you can really see it, and you don't need to express that to them, or speak out and protest about corruption, just do what you got to do and move out of the space to change and shift the energy. So eventually there will be a time though when you realize I can't move. I can't do this anymore. I need to move from this. Even if it's not people you live with, again, just people in your everyday circle, in your environment. Sometimes it's in a workplace. What becomes possible once what becomes possible once I stop believing the grid is the only thing keeping me alive? That's deep. What becomes possible once I believe that the grid is the only thing keeping me alive? And that's the same thing with this crab in a barrel mindset. You got, I wrote an outline of a book that I need to get back on, and it's about the mindset of the barrel. And you got to remember, because there's many times that the barrel may have benefited you in some kind of way. So you develop a barrel mindset as well. So we talk about, oh, everybody's like crabs in the barrels. Oh, black people, whatever we're saying. But you got to also take responsibility of what you did or what you do or how you think that contributes to you staying in the barrel. What kind of mindset do you have? Because it does become a moment when you realize that you are a part of the barrel behavior, you know? Now, let's go into module 8, reinforcing our own spells, habits, and gifts. So this goes into what are we doing to ourselves while we're examining what everyone else is doing to us? How do we contribute again? How are we reinforcing what we already saying everybody else is doing to us, or somebody could be doing, but how you playing a part in keeping that spell active, So our habits matter. Like, for some people who may be thinking that your voice may be your ministry. You got to ask yourself sometime, like, how am I treating my voice? If you're a singer, like smoking and just things like that. And your voice and your instrument carries gifts, or a certain thing, like I said, when I spoke to even certain foods that we no longer can eat, whether it's sugar or just whatever it is. But a lot of times it contributes to the frequency that we're on, or why we're not really achieving certain things. And I spoke about the voice because the voice is so powerful in creating, manifesting new things, but also breaking these curses, breaking these old habits. If being out, like especially in the winter season. And I always tell people, protect your throat. Some of them are out with clothes on and different things that don't even make sense. But they know that they have a certain job to do. Like for me, I talk a lot. So I teach, I do readings and things. So I know that my voice is something that I have to protect. So during that season, I work extra hard. Why am I speaking to that? Because you remember the spell that Ursula put on Ariel? What did she do? She attacked her voice, right? She stole her voice. Sometimes you may think that's a curse, like certain things are outcomes that we may have going on in our physical body, and we're like, oh, I'm being punished, or why is this happening? Somebody's working a spell on me, my back hurts, but may not be looking at the lack of self-care that we may be given to things such as our voice, our physical body, our stress that's building up, or things that's causing headaches. And again, diet plays a big part in it. It may be too much caffeine, too much sugar, or too much meat, or just whatever it is. But we have to also too many cigarettes. Look at too much weed. How our habits are reinforcing certain spells. Back to why some people can't fight the spell. When they talk about, oh, this practitioner is doing this or this person's doing that. How are you helping with it though? How are you aiding it? What part are you playing in it? Even if a person was sitting at an altar, or a person was, some thinking, or they're claiming prophet or prophetess of your life, and they're speaking these things into existence. What are you doing to contribute to it? Are you breaking, or are you breaking the spell? Like, they can say what they want. I know I'm healthy. I know I'm this. I know my mind is positive. I know I'm well rested, or I know I take care of me. So that's not going to give the so-called spell as much power as it would over somebody that's literally on the frequency that they're speaking to and keeping you in, right? And now I know some habits are difficult to change, and we may need support. We may need spiritual guidance, sometimes professional help or discipline. But see, this is the part right here that's so important, because a lot of us, we get pulled into certain habits of lifestyle, like me and this ice. Oh my God, I eat ice, and I'm told over and over again, like, it's not good for your teeth, but I'll still eat this ice. And I say, oh, it's your iron, and I do believe that, but I do take iron pills, and I do eat food that have a lot of iron in it. When I'm going through that, the doctor said my iron was fine, and it's times I'll back off of it, but it's still a mind thing now. Now it's become a habit, and that's not good. And habits are hard to break. But I'll find other things I need to do. Like, okay, I'm not gonna chew any ice tonight. It's crazy, but I done told y'all one of my secrets. But sometimes if it's something like even smoking cigarettes, or whatever, for other people, I don't know if You know, what people are, they got people with different types of addictions. And some of those addictions may actually need professional help. It may take a higher level of discipline. Everybody don't have willpower, but you gotta develop some type of willpower in order to break these habits and spells. Even that, you know, you can't be lazy. So when we in spiritual warfare, you can't be lazy either, you know. People want to see certain results but don't want to put the work in. And that's, you know, if you want to see change, you got to change. Right. And that's with anything we do in life. I don't care what it is, from having this the body you want, to having a career in life you want, to having the relationships with people, that how you're cultivating relationships. If you want to be, you know, some powerful um whatever, you know, or I, you know, I got the power, you know, I'm the most powerful magician or whatever, you still have to put the work in. It still takes work. It still takes a level of a certain cultivation, a certain discipline, a certain practice to become what it is that, you know, or the, you know, that you want to be, or what you're trying to achieve energetically. So we still have to examine our own participation, though. You know, it's a lot of things we can blame. You know, let's blame the Twinkie, let's blame the cupcake, let's blame the drug, let's blame, we can blame it on the rain. But am I protecting the gifts? Am I protecting my purpose, or participating in the destruction of the very thing I'm asking to preserve? Am I participating in the destruction of the very thing that I'm asking to preserve? Okay, so now let's talk about, let me see how much longer we got. Because sometimes my bills, when I be thinking, I just be thinking of all these different things. I ain't gonna lie though, this, how long have we been going on? Okay, it's been an hour. It's probably gonna be around the same amount of time as the other one. Okay, so let's go into the collective spell. So going back to this energy grid, what happens when the entire communities repeatedly feed the same story? This is another form of the collective spell. The energetic grid, again, it doesn't just stop at families and relationships. There are collective stories about race, America, white people, black people, oppression, money, power, relationships, success, failures, and who supposedly controls our future. We can acknowledge history, injustice, and real systems of power without allowing our consciousness to become permanently organized around complaints, resentment, and waiting for someone else's downfall. You know, we'll sit here and like, ooh, when are they going to get their karma? Or this person hasn't. This is about to be the one, though. Pay attention. This may piss some people off about what I'm about to move into now, especially people that still may have a love for some of these spells. You're actually in love with some of these spells. They got people that, you know, most conscious people, we understand, even if we haven't totally moved away from certain collective stories, collective traditions, things that was reinforced in us, and you know, from childhood, that we believe we got to do, we got to celebrate, we got to continue these spells. But we'll sit here and not really see how we are really participating, actively participating in some of these storylines, you know. And then we're talking about why these people still doing what they doing to us, why they get to do this and this and this, and why, you know, read between the lines. Why do they have everything? Why are we still here? And even the ones that's made it beyond us, if you notice, they'll end up on that same energetic grid as the ones that we feel is oppressed or have oppressed us for years. They'll get on that grid. That's a whole nother story. But we're gonna talk about the part we do have control over. At some point, we have to ask ourselves, what are we building, practicing, and reinforcing? Can I recognize what has been done without allowing what has been done to determine everything that I believe is possible? Let's talk about the holidays, for instance. Are we reinforcing the collective spell? How much of what we call tradition have we consciously examined? And people tend to get kind of touchy over this. I would say even over the last 10, 10, 15 years, you know, there's been a lot of information coming out online and a lot of information on these social media sites. Even before there was a TikTok, you had a lot of people sharing lots of information on Facebook. They still do. People talking about the truth about holidays, or they may be wanting to shed light on religion versus spirituality, or cultural things, or whatever. And it's caused some things has caused outrage in people, or debates in people. And for some people, it's actually opened their mind up. It's given them information that they may have otherwise wouldn't have never had access to, or wouldn't have never been inspired to look up or to examine. But there's a lot of things that surround holidays, the holiday traditions, that we need to look at. Even though we know it, some people know it and still will ignore it and be the main ones complaining about certain grids, about certain consequences, certain outcomes. Why is it like this? Oh, I'm sick of this. It's kind of like that song, Christmas Times Come But Once a Year. I know in the Black community, that's a popular song, and it's played during Christmas time. And the man is saying Christmas times it comes but once a year. And then he started complaining, like he's talking about all of this stuff about Christmas, all of the great stuff, and then he goes into the bridge. It takes the next 6 months to pay these bills. Like after you spend all this money for Christmas, now it's taking you 6 months to pay it back. Every time I think about it, it gives me chills. So he's upset by it, but he don't care. Because Christmas comes but once a year. So that means he should never have no complaints. I'm not saying no, never have complaints, but that's a collective mindset. People do this same shit every single year. And even some people are putting stress on themselves, and real stress, real sadness, real a lot of things have happened when people can't get the things they want, can't get the things they want for their children, can't get the things they want for themselves, or it's not this big extravagant holiday season, right? But let's talk about that holiday collective spell. How much do we do during the holidays is actually a conscious choice? And how much of it is something we've been conditioned, obligated, guilted, or pressured into doing? And there's so many different layers to the holiday conversation that everybody doesn't experience it the same way. So one of the things I'm going to say is this: I'm not going into uncovering the truth about holidays and stuff. If people don't know that the origins of holidays are rooted in pagan, certain spiritual practices, witchcraft, and other political agendas, then that's where you stay connected to this energy that you fight against. I'm gonna just say this: challenge yourself if you don't know. For those that don't know by now, most people do know. um well, I'll say a certain group, I won't say most people, because there's a lot of people that continue to reinforce these spells. So just challenge yourself not to put it down. You choose and you do what you want to do. Celebrate what you want to celebrate. Some people call it different names, and they'll change it, and do their own traditions during the holiday seasons, whatever season is in. But just challenge yourself if you really are serious about breaking certain spells, and look and see what is connected to the origin of these holidays and the early church. And I'm gonna just leave that there. But let's keep on going into this experience, or this collective experience. For people across different races, religions, cultures, and families, holidays can carry an enormous amount of collective expectation. There can be pressure around money, gifts, food, clothing, traveling, church, so forth and so on. Things you're expected to do, family gatherings, decorations, entertainment, and simply showing up in a way that everybody expects you to show up, whatever that is. Who house is going to be at? People can complain every year about being broke after Christmas while continuing to spend money they don't have. Someone can feel insignificant because on Valentine's Day, nobody brought them anything. And it doesn't even matter. The sad part, it could be somebody who has done for you every other day. You may have a good man or a good woman. It's normally women, but men are trip too, but it's normally women that may feel unloved. But you may have a man that's good to you. Um, we're more sensitive about Valentine's and stuff. Now they got some men that want gifts and all of that. But I know a lot of times women will judge the way the man feels about them based on something like Valentine's Day, of how deep his affection go, how valid his love is or not is, and not is, how valid his love is or not, and your value. Sometimes you're looking at your value. You may be looking around at other people or men who may have went all out, and the person has got all of these gifts and flowers and chocolate and this and that, and they're doing things, and somebody may not have done that for you or given you anything, and this could really get people down. You know, some people, they begin to, this has caused breakups. They've had people that's literally hurt each other physically over something like Valentine's Day. And that was one reason that, like, once I was in my late 20s, I literally kind of stopped celebrating it. Valentine's Day, people would still buy me gifts and stuff, but I stopped celebrating that day because of that type of energy. Like, I just remember, like, at the time I was married, and, my husband do a lot of things. He's kind of forgetful. He's dead now. He passed away, but he would be kind of like a person that'd get locked in on something he want to do. So yeah, him forgetting me on Valentine's Day or just giving me this little gift after I went all out. Yeah, it was selfish in my opinion. Yeah, it was very selfish. I was very upset. But I think the level of anger I went to, and nothing physical happened or anything, but just the anger I felt inside, just the pressure and just what I felt, I just felt like that's too much. Like, it's just kind of too much for one day when this person is paying the majority of all of the bills, paying the mortgage, all of these different things, and I'm paying what I pay. But we show love in so many other ways. This person has supported things that I've done, supported business ventures that I've had. Always showed up positively when I travel and stuff. So why would I let something like a Valentine's Day determine? And this was many years ago, and I still hold this energy now, you know, as far as something like that, especially when you see and understand what the origin of it is. And it's not to be, you know, a party pooper, but when you talk about certain things that are being reinforced, like when it brings so much malice and hostility at times in a space of love, and you're measuring someone else's love based on a chocolate box of candy, or thinking that they didn't think of you because of this and that, no matter what else they've done, you know. And some people gonna just be sorry all around. Don't expect the Valentine's gift. He don't do nothing, or she don't do nothing on no day, right? But someone else may dread the holidays because they're expecting to go somewhere they don't want to go or interact with people they deliberately avoid during the rest of the year. We do a lot of stuff for holidays. It's like we put on, for those that still celebrate. If participating continually leaves me feeling financially, this is the question to sit with though. If participating continually leaves me feeling financially, emotionally, or spiritually depleted, what am I obligated to preserve? And that's the universal message for that. But there's another specific conversation I want to tap into with Black people in the conscious communities and stuff like that, right? Because most of us, we've already like, nope, I don't celebrate holidays. And some people are conscious, but they're still caught up like I used to be, because I'm an only child from my mother, right? So she expects certain things. They're gonna expect it. She's gonna buy things even if I say I don't celebrate this, don't buy me any gifts. They're gonna do it anyway. So I have to put myself, because I used to be Scrooge, like, and just really have this nasty energy because this isn't what I'm doing, and they're not respecting my beliefs. They're not respecting the way I'm moving and the way I'm moving with my son. So I would be upset, and I may not have been in a position or even had the strength, okay, to stand up to my mama, and be like, we're not doing this, or I'm not coming over for Christmas, or just whatever. Sometimes I've lived there during that period. So, but I got to a point where I would say I celebrate my family, and it made an easier exchange, right? But what happens when your consciousness of spiritual beliefs change, but your family traditions don't? I want to especially speak to the Black conscious community here, because another dynamic can develop when somebody begins questioning traditional religion, entering in the conscious community, studying alternative spirituality, or simply researching the origins of traditions that they were raised or we were raised to practice. At some point, you may discover that a holiday doesn't mean what you were taught it meant, or yeah, that someone taught you that this is what it meant. And then you find out, like I said, challenge those origins. The origins may not no longer align with you in your present spiritual beliefs. So that creates another question. Do I actually need this tradition in order to practice what I say I believe? Some Christians themselves have consciously chosen a different relationship, like with even Christmas. For them, they may say something like Jesus is the reason for the season. And I'm speaking to this, especially people that's going broke over holidays, or people who still feel obligated. There's people that stand on business like, I'm not doing this. And even in religion is my point. There's people who still may not celebrate it, where it's just some a time of consumption. They may tell you something like, "Oh, we don't really do gifts, or we reflect on the Lord because Jesus is the reason for the season." I was that kind of Christian. I've always got gifts when I was a Christian, but I'm speaking to reflecting on what we were really saying that this is about. If this is the birth of Jesus, or the belief that many people may hold, or whatever that is for you, this winter solstice event, this Saturnalia holiday, right? And for some of you, challenge yourselves and look at how slavery celebrated Christmas here in America. Some of you prepared to be shocked. It's very intriguing though, and it could make you kind of like, damn, it'll give you more insight on the system. And that was definitely some spell work going on there. And that's the reason I'm speaking on these holidays, because a lot of the things that we wonder about why we're still being um certain things are still being reenacted, certain things that we're still reinforcing. It comes in the form of stuff like holidays, and the way we worship, and the way we move, and how all it takes is participation to keep it alive. It's not saying kill the holiday. I'm gonna let you guys sit with that for whoever may not, understand what I'm saying, or they may not even understand why I'm going so intense with it. You have to, if you're really trying to cut the head of the snake, it's important to have awareness of what it is you are partaking in, and how you are contributing to a certain condition that we deal with collectively. What would happen if we all just stopped buying Christmas presents? And not just black people either. What if we just said stop and just stop it? What if just nobody shopped during Black Friday? What would really happen? It's something to think about, though. I know a lot of spells would be broken. That's for damn sure. It's like, I'm not saying don't do what you do, because for some people they'll never stop that. Thanksgiving, Easter, all of these things. But it's important to know, the important part is knowing why you're doing what you're doing. If this no longer aligns with me, why am I participating in it still? But when you change, I'm gonna go to the next thing. When you change, but the energetic grid doesn't. So what happens when you finally made a conscious decision to stop participating? And then they're gonna be calling you weird, or what, you in some voodoo or something? What's wrong with you? You a Muslim? You don't celebrate X, Y, and Z? Whatever, whatever it is. I know Islam teaches that we shouldn't, I'm not speaking verbatim, but just of the message of not allowing a belief or some differences to keep us away from celebrating with our tribe and our family. And, you don't have to, you got to know the mindset you're going into it with. Of course, like new conscious people, especially, they may, oh no, I renounce Christmas and everything that has to, I don't want to be disrespectful because I can really go there, but you get this certain anger. But when you get to a certain level of consciousness, you move beyond that anger. Like I said, I could be Scrooge and I can cuss and talk all kind of stuff about why we shouldn't be doing this or why we shouldn't be doing that. People do it even with internet. Y'all on this white man's, da, 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 but you on internet, um, talking that same shit while you asking people why they doing this or celebrating this. We just need to check our own selves, not really worried about what other people are doing. So, like I said, you can take what I'm saying or leave it, take what resonates with you. But, anyway, it's all in what you want to do. Like, you can be at a level of consciousness where you can, especially if people respect you, they accept you, they're not judging you, they're not making these little crazy comments. You making still fellowship with people that's on another energetic grid, even when you're in their company. A lot of times it upsets it, but if you have family that's accepting and understanding, y'all can still be on the same energetic grid and not believe the same thing. Yeah, I said that. You can literally still be on a same frequency, and that frequency may be love. That energetic grid may be love because they respect who you are, or whatever lifestyle choices that you decide to make for you. They have families that are like that, And in healthy families and healthy friend circles, they accept and love you just for you. So you may can still operate in that space. But most of the times when people are on an energetic grid, there's a certain mindset that keeps this grid or this fence or these frequencies in place. So it sometimes prevents you from moving to the level you need to move in. And again, unless you're strong in what you're doing and you just, you some people don't mind the conflicts, but we speaking to people that's trying to break the spell. Okay, I'm speaking to the people that is wanting to literally break certain limitations and things that seem like it's cyclic. So when you change but the energetic grid doesn't, what happens when you made a conscious decision to stop participating, but everyone around you continues treating your decision as temporary or irrelevant? So going back into the decisions about holidays, this is where the holiday conversation connects directly back to the energetic grid. You may have stopped celebrating years ago, but your family still buy you gifts. They're still expecting you to be at the gathering. They're still including you in these exchanges. They still expect you to reciprocate. They may even guilt you into to stand in a certain tradition with them because it's family. So you may feel guilty. But I've already kind of went through that. So, and because the entire culture shifts into holiday mode at the same time, so that means the whole culture, meaning, we're seeing commercials. You may be trying to block some certain things out, and you're walking down the street, and everybody got this certain merriment. And I don't mean just to attack Christmas, but Christmas is a big one. That's a big one. That's a holiday that many, many people celebrate. During that whole season of Thanksgiving and all of this stuff. But even with that, whatever it is, you may be shopping in the store. They putting out holiday stuff 2 months before the holiday even come, already pushing the consumerism. You may hear people making plans, holiday parties and stuff. And a party you may still feel away or feel like, damn, you may feel lonely because sometimes breaking out of that grid puts you in spaces of being isolated. Okay. So again, sometimes you can still find yourself slipping automatically into that Christmas thinking because you spend a lifetime being conditioned to associate that season with particular behaviors, emotions, music, food, and family rituals. And it is a time where people should still think of warmth and, because it's a cold season. So you may still want to do something that brings people together and gather. It doesn't necessarily have to be that holiday. Breaking the spell for you may be creating new holidays or new reasons to celebrate, new traditions, and that's where I'm at. You may, but you still may want a warm drink. You still may want to make cider or something like that. Not for anything that's attached to a holiday, but just to be in that season's energy. You may want to create something else, but all humans get cold. We all want warmth and love and all of that, but we know that that's only a certain image that's been created around these holidays. But if you know the origin of them, most of them have some different beginnings. Some of these were very bloody holidays or very lawless and just immoral even some of the holidays. I'm gonna just leave that there. Like I said, do the research if you're not a person that's already in that way of thinking about the old programming. So even after you consciously change your beliefs, the old programming can continue to run because of these rituals that's being reinforced and what we see in our communities are in the world in stores and what the propaganda is. Okay, so the question we're going to sit with is, have I consciously changed my relationship with this tradition, or am I allowing everyone else's relationship with it to determine mine? So when other people's gifts create an obligation, does somebody give you something and you automatically have to participate back in this tradition? That's another thing. That they bought me something, now I have to buy them something. And sometimes you'll get pulled in just because of that. And this can become particularly difficult when you've clearly said, I don't celebrate something. I don't want a gift. And then some people will get offended if you give the gift back. I keep my gifts. I'll be like, and I keep my gifts. It's not that I just get a lot of gifts, but I'm saying when people bless me with a gift, but that don't mean I necessarily got one for you. It's really difficult because I don't like to even get pulled into all of this gift stuff. But there's certain people in my life that always expect a certain thing. They're going to. Whether it's my son, my mama, my daddy. So I deal with that. I deal with children like, oh, this is a children's situation, and give them some gifts, some candy, something like that, and be done with it and make them happy or whatever. But it's definitely not because, this is something I gotta do and I need to align with. Last Christmas, I sat here by myself with nobody. For Thanksgiving, I spent Thanksgiving by myself. My cousin invited me over and I went by her house. And that was only so I wouldn't be lonely because of the way I live and the way I think and the way I'm in a space where a tradition is strong here in the South, real strong. So I just spent time by myself. I didn't celebrate anything. I normally say I celebrate my family, not even that. And there was many reasons for that because I've been shaking this energetic grid since the 2020. They don't know how to take me all the time. So they've done things to make me feel isolated. I was okay. I sat here and I've been working on teaching myself how to play the flute. I made me a whole bunch of I had me some cider. I had food, and I just really worked on my spirituality and I worked on content and enjoyed my live streams and that's what I did. Anyway, yeah. It's sad because some people really have been pushed out of family circles and out of friendship circles and may suffer silently. It's a lot of people like that because they haven't found their tribe yet. They still in this space where they don't know what to create. That's what sometimes keep us in this spell too. Because once you decide to make these shifts, sometimes certain things were space holders in your life, like people that's breaking the habits. So now what do I do in place of this? And that's the same thing with these traditions. If I remove this, then what do we replace it with? And that's why a lot of people, they don't really some people they don't know how to stick with the conscious stuff. If they're not really rooted in it, and not really rooted in like occult knowledge or metaphysics and certain spiritual things, they'll go back to what they used to do and back to confusion because they don't know they don't know really how to they haven't had enough information or they haven't, they don't know how to stand alone. Some people it's hard for that. You get isolated and stuff and you get so lonely or you get so whatever it is, you get pulled back into this grid because you haven't learned to build a new life or to manifest something else or to find different groups and circles. You haven't found your soul tribe yet, and you definitely haven't learned um or you can't. Some people can't. It's just hard for some people to sit alone. I don't always like it, but I'm good with it for long periods of time. So, but we're gonna change that for me because that's not always good. People make the world go round, and I mean, I do get out, but I'm more by myself than I am with other people. But I definitely get out. I go and spend long trips. When I leave, I go to my mom's house sometime, and I'll stay there for a few months just to, you know, because I can. I can work from wherever I go. So anyway, how do you definitely can refuse gifts. You can do all of those things. And even refusing a gift can sometimes be a way to break a spell if you're ready for that pushback. Because some people will get offended. You can let people know earlier before the holidays even start. And they don't, that's not necessarily that they're not going to honor it, but in order to set your boundary, somebody may have to get their feelings hurt if that's your thing. And I'm going to get away from the holidays after this. You can say, I don't celebrate Christmas, I celebrate my family. For those that know how to have the balance where, you may still come over because, everybody's gathering in that space. Or you may choose to be by yourself or do something totally different and don't even acknowledge the date. Sometimes it's hard though because the energy, the spell work is already set within the season. It's like there's a certain feeling, that like the spirit of Christmas or um whatever's going on. It's Easter and you see everybody wearing pastel colors and boiling eggs and dyeing them and all this stuff. So you may still be aware of it, but once you're past that energetically, it's not going to affect you the same way. You know, especially once you begin to be okay with being alone at times or being outside of that family matrix. You know, so the cost of breaking the collective tradition. The choice is ultimately ours or yours, so it belongs to you. So it doesn't matter how people feel about it. But the cost of breaking the collective tradition, what happens when breaking a spell also means risking the isolation. That's what I just went over. Um, And this is a real thing, refusing the tradition means you're the one that's missing at the gathering. It may mean everybody else being together. We talked about this already. I just kind of went off script because I'm looking at my notes, but you're not a part of the exchange. Everybody else participating and you're just behind. You may be scrolling Facebook and you choose not to celebrate, or you wouldn't even invite it. They got times where you are tolerant of these traditions and stuff like that, but because you stand in what you believe and you stand comfortably in that and you're not shrinking, you're not even invited because your awakeness, it shocks the grid, it shocks the system. So yeah, oof. And that's when they really spinning them spells. They spend that day really talking shit. That's why in those spaces, you have to be strong. Even before going into those environments sometime, you need to already be blessed up, prayed up, or have your protections around you before you even go in those environments, just to protect your peace. But that's a good day for the witch hunt to witch hunt. Not even witch hunt, but the witch council. That's when they all sit there and cast spells. But anyway, um and sometimes you'll be there and you being ignored anyway, so why go? you know um Sometimes freedom and loneliness can occupy the same room for a while. Your freedom versus, can I deal with this loneliness? But does it feel good to be free? Does it feel good to live your truth, without crawling back or feeling as if you're still pulled into this certain energy frequency? So the real holiday question is, I'm not telling people don't celebrate Christmas, or um, it's not about celebrate it or don't celebrate it. It's about your consciousness. Learn what you're participating in. Learn the history. Examine your beliefs. Examine your finances. How important is this? It's only one day, and you be paying the bills for what? The next 6 months or next year or whatever. Examine the family pressure. And that part is important because you really need to know and understand the family that you're in. If you're a part of a great, loving, supportive family, that's great, but really examine those characters on this grid. It's going to start with family always. Um, Even if you're raised by other families, or you might have been adopted, or other family members raised you, it doesn't matter. Whatever that unit is, wherever you came up in, or the tribe, that's when you start with the examination. And then everything else spreads out this way. You gotta break that spell though at the head. And sometimes it means not the hell with people thinking, but just know this level of freedom and spell breaking. When I say spell breaking, I'm talking about breaking that energy. If you just tapped in, and welcome in everybody that's watching, I appreciate it. We'll be getting through this soon. But just know that when you choose to live in your true freedom and really do you and really elevate, that's gonna upset the energy grid. It's like stepping on an ant pile or something. It ain't coming out, and that can manifest in different ways where you're literally being attacked, people verbally telling you stuff, or everybody just stop talking to you. You know, we reinforce the spell by wussing up, by crawling back, by letting them win, and hey, do it at your own time. I'm not here to judge anybody, but sometimes they have some real dominant family members and they make you feel like you talk all this shit, and then when they step to you, you just be like, okay. They wear you down, especially those big mamas and strong paternal figures as well. But this is the closing question on the holiday piece. When this season arrives, am I consciously choosing how I participate, or does the collective still make that decision for me? Yeah. So let's go to breaking the spell. Once I recognize the pattern, what am I prepared to do differently? Sometimes breaking the spell is spiritual work. Sometimes it's prayer ritual. It's moving locations. It's making more money so you can move. And sometimes that, like I said, you may have to stay, what I was saying earlier, stay in that energetic grid, or you're not really in the grid though once you become aware. You're still in it, but it's going to affect you differently and it's going to hit different because your frequency is changing. So if you can't afford it at that time, then you need to make a plan. Whether it's working two jobs, you got a side hustle, you got something else going on, so that you can move. And I would say go to school, but school, when you living with somebody else, That's not always doable because there's people that's not going to support you going to school and living with them. Depending on who the people are, your relationship to them, the age group the age you are, and all of that. That could also be an issue. But whatever the case, do what you can. If you are in a situation where you can do what you can, so you can move to the level you need to be at. Sometimes you literally got a plan to climb out the barrel. It's not just climbing out. Sometimes you literally got to plan to break this grid. But you began to break the spell as soon as you realize what the game is and how you're contributing to the game. Then the game is not, it doesn't have any power anymore, right? Sometimes you have gifts and blessings that you can't speak about. You can't tell people about these spells, these these gifts. You may got accepted to a prestigious school, or you may have a job that's just something ideal, and you want to just go and blurt it all out. Sometimes when you dealing with a toxic energy grid or people that have this type of vibration of wanting to keep you down, you don't say anything. You have to move in a space, and that's part of also silence. That's a part of powerful piece when you're talking about manifesting and really elevating. It's keeping your peace, keeping silence. Because if not, you're stirring up the grid. You're giving them all of the reasons to attack, to create havoc, and you just simply wanting to move forward. Sometimes you refuse the argument. There's people that'll keep you in, trying to weaken your strength or keep you tired by making you engage or causing you to engage in these circular arguments. And it just really circular because some of it don't even make sense. Sometimes that what wakes it up when you like, is this person for real right now? Like, what are we even talking about? And you begin to see like, okay, I see what you want. You literally trying to get my energy from me. You want to siphon this energy by keeping this negative stuff going on and keeping me pulled into these arguments and even gossip. People calling you with all of this stuff, and then they get mad when you get quiet or you're not participating in it. Sometimes ignore the phone when that deliverer of negative news is calling you. It's sometimes changing who has access to you. That sometimes it's changing your whole phone number if you can. You know, sometimes it's recognizing the people that you thought couldn't survive without were actually a part of what convinced you that you couldn't survive without them. Sometimes it's the people that you feel um, that you need validation from, are the very people that you need to get away from. The people you don't need validation, the ones I'm proud of you, but they've never done anything without a motive or a agenda or anything at all for you, but then they feel as if you owe them their pride or they owe you their pride. And that's something else because I don't like that word. I'm not a person that's big on I'm proud of you. And there's people that know that and they'll still say it to me. And there's people that really don't know it. I don't like that word because everybody, I've dealt with people, I'm not gonna say everybody, but I've dated some guys. When a person tells me they proud of me, I've been betrayed by those very people. It can come off very condescending when they have not seen your struggle or they have not aided in your struggle. They didn't support your struggle. They didn't support your climb or whatever you were trying to do in purpose. They did everything they could to stop it, or they didn't do anything at all where they could have did something. They could have been the ones part of the gossip talking about you. You'll never be nothing. You'll never succeed. Now all of a sudden you proud of me. It just seems very. It's just something that I don't like. Being happy for a person, that's one thing. You may be now if you are a person like a teacher that they respect, a person that did help them, a family member or a friend that really stood with them as they went through different valleys, and y'all were there for each other, holding your hand almost, or just at least championing you up. The family member that when everybody else talked about you and you were the black sheep, they're the one saying, baby, don't believe that, you can do it. That grandmother that always whisper that word in your ear or honor somebody that reinforced positivity when they kept trying to reinforce the negativity, right? And now they really see you standing in your light and your glory. They tell you they proud of you. You can really believe that. You can take that to the bank because they always been there for you. But everybody else, your pride don't matter to me. Go be proud of you. That's how I feel. Now, anyway, some people use the word pride wrong, but many times you got to watch the person that's giving you this so-called praise. Because even those false flattery pieces is a part of the spell work that they're speaking. When you know, you know. Um, Sometimes breaking the spell begins long before anybody outside of you can see anything has changed, because you got to change from the inside out, especially if you're reinforcing it. Okay, so I'm gonna do my closing. Got a little closing here. We're almost done. The closing is the challenge is who is feeding the grid, and that's what we got to keep in mind. Are you again reinforcing the spell or breaking it? Who is feeding the grid? What am I feeding? What have I internalized? What am I practicing? What am I tolerating because I currently need something? See, that lack mindset too can get us, or a greedy mindset can get us stuck in spaces and spells we don't want to be in, are things that we tether ourselves to. What resources do I need to build? What habits are working against my gifts? What collective stories and traditions am I repeating? And what can I begin doing differently before my circumstances are perfect? Because sometimes somebody really is working against you. Sometimes several people are working against you. Sometimes the grid has been operating for years. Sometimes the grid is cultural, it's familiar, or it's familiar. It's for familiar as well. I'm getting the words familiar and familiar, like your family. Sometimes it's spiritual, and sometimes part of the grid has gotten inside of us. And that's the thing. So when you recognize that how the grid has gotten inside of us and we are reinforcing the spells, recognizing doesn't make you powerless. Recognizing it is where your power begins to change. And that's when our participation have to begin, right? So are you breaking the spell or reinforcing it? So that's pretty much the bill, you guys. There's one last thing that I'm gonna do. Let me go ahead and make a chime. I want you guys to just, you can sit with this for a moment. Hey, Brother Bay. Oh my God, what's good? I didn't have the comments turned on. My apologies. So I have one last thing, and then we're gonna close on this. This is just something to walk away with. So as we close today, I put together a spoken word or a divine intention. Some people may call it a prayer or a poem, but these are the words that I put together, speaking directly to this energetic grid, whether we are consciously fighting to break it or reinforce it. Today, we become conscious of the role we play in our own sabotage, delays, heartache, confusion, and even sometimes our own demise. But that's not to say that others haven't contributed or haven't worked against us or aren't feeding this energy that has been blocked and are affecting us. So this is speaking to the collective. Take it as it resonates. It's speaking to both the internal and external forces. And when I say internal, I'm speaking of the ways we ourselves may continue to reinforce the grid. So as we close today, we go into devotion mode. For some of you, it's kind of late, but for those that like to stand and pray or stand and do divine intention, stand and speak, feel free, because movement is where it starts at. For others, it may just be sitting down and putting both feet on the floor. For others, it may just be listening. But I want you to hear this and take what you can from this build. Take a few deep breaths. And one last one. Take a nice deep breath and exhale slowly. When I do the chime, hold it. So here we go. To the ones burning candles in the dark, hoping my fire loses its spark. To the whispers saying they'll never make it, they'll never survive. Watch how your poison keeps my purpose alive. I see the grid you tried to build. I feel the heaviness that you tried to send. But the contract is broken. The loop has come to an end. I pull the plug out of your matrix. I take my power back from the floor or your floor. You can no longer harvest my energy because I don't live on that frequency anymore. To every curse, to every glance of malice, to every toxic word spoken, return to sender. To the sudden fatigue, the heavy fog, the spirit trying to make me surrender, return to sender. I do not own this weight. I do not accept this fate. I am not a battery for your insecurity or your hate. I rise out of the laziness. I break out the spin. The moment I move my body is the moment that I win. I reclaim my space. I reclaim my mind. I leave your low vibration trap far behind. The spell is broken. The current is dead. I am the architect of the grid ahead. And so it is. Okay? And so it is. And so before we close officially, I just want to say this before we leave, just one more thing. Not just tonight, but ask yourself this daily. If you feel like you've been in this stagnant energy or things that loop around or people are moving against you or whatever you've been experiencing, the mantra to walk away with is, am I breaking the spell or reinforcing it? When you make a decision, when you fall back into an old habit, when you engage with certain people, conversations, when you respond to something, when you spend your money, when you speak to yourself and you find yourself entering that old cycle, just am I breaking the spell or reinforcing it? That's the mantra. That's the thought piece I want you guys to walk away with. And I want to thank everybody who's tapped in. Shout out to Brother Ishmael Bay. Yeah, and anyone else, like I can't see. I want to thank everyone who tapped in with me. And yeah, just know I'll be back for Metaphysical Monday. Y'all tap in. And we're going to talk a little bit more about Dwight. I seen that I got some good feedback on some different platforms from YouTube to also on some different platforms. So we're going to go ahead and get a little bit deeper into Dwight and the journey of Rock. Ashe, love, light, peace.